also just in general in life. I have identified these 4 transcendent questions. And the reason that I call these the 4 transcendent questions is because at any stage in development, in entrepreneurship, in building your business, or if you're just if you're building your career or trying to advance in your career, at any stage, whether you're a startup, you're brand new to the idea, or you've been doing it for 10 years or 30 years, you can ask yourself these questions to give yourself a gut check onto where you actually are, guiding your actions. The 4 transcendent questions are why, what defines success, next steps, and how and when will I exit? 4 huge questions, and I want you all to make sure that you write those down, get those down today at every step of the way as you build your business. Think about building out your ideas. You're going to be referencing these questions. So, a top reason small companies fail. Okay, statistically, the top reason that small companies fail would be that they're starting for the wrong reason. So let's look at that first transcendent question. Okay, why? Why are we doing what we're doing? So here's some examples of this illustrating this point of just because we can do something doesn't mean that we should do something. Okay, so statistically speaking, most small businesses failed because they get started for the wrong reasons. Let's look at some fun examples of some businesses who are established that maybe went into areas that they should have avoided, that weren't actually in line with their why in the first place. Okay, so this one on the far left here, Pepsi AM. In 1989, Pepsi decided they were going to target the breakfast cola drinker with Pepsi AM. And as you can imagine, since it's no longer around, it kind of didn't go over too well. And they tried another sort of iteration in 1992 called Crystal Pepsi, which was just basically clear Pepsi. Also did not go very well. So they just went back to their main formula, their success for winning, their formula for success. They just went back to Pepsi, and obviously you know the rest of the story. There, in the middle there, this is a good one. In 1990, Coors decided that in addition to its alcoholic offerings, it was going to offer Rocky Mountain sparkling water. Well, as you can imagine, again, because it's not still around, it turns out when people buy Coors, they don't really want to buy water. They want to go straight for the beer, okay? And so that went down in flames. So on the right there, maybe some of you recognize this product, maybe most of you don't. This is the Microsoft Zoom, okay? And so this is 2006. This was Microsoft's response to obviously the Apple iPod, and they would say that the fundamental problem with this product was that this was a chasing product. They were trying too much to chase the Apple iPod, and so they weren't brave enough. They weren't innovative enough. They said, hey, we can do what Apple is doing. And I don't think maybe they step back enough and say, should we try to replicate what we're doing, or should we try to do something that's a little bit more innovative, in which case they might have been more successful. You, at your beginning stages or whatever stage you are in your business, should always be asking yourself, number one, why am I doing what I'm doing? And this will absolutely tie into you being able to achieve financial independence in what you're doing. So check out this illustration on the screen. This is called the Golden Circle, and this was actually developed by a brilliant author, Simon Sinek, in his book, Start With Why. And at the bottom of the screen, I did send you the link to one of his very popular TED Talks, How Great Leaders Inspire Action. And the basis of this circle is that everybody knows what they do. In fact, when you go to a party, a cocktail party, and you're just standing next to somebody, one of the first things you ask them as an icebreaker is, well, what do you do? And everybody can respond to that, right? Oh, I'm an IT consultant, and I help people install mainframes, or I have my own construction business, so I spend most of the day building houses. So we know what we do. Everybody knows that. Now, some might know how they do it, right? And in different layers of an organization or even your small business, you're going to have people that know how to do something better than others. But really, when you get to the core of it, and this is the most important piece according to Simon Sinek, very few know why. Okay, so especially employees of large corporations, and even employees of small and mid-sized corporations might not even know internally the mission of the organization. They might not know that instead of just saying, well, if we're a heating and air conditioning company, you might answer, what do you do with, well, we install air conditioning units in people's homes. Instead, maybe the better answer would say, what do you do? Well, we help people be more comfortable in any given season. We actually bring comfort to the American family. That's a far more compelling why than we install air conditioning units in homes. And so if you can get that down, not only internalize that concept in yourself, but also to your employees through the organizational structure, you're going to have exponential success, not just in the execution of your processes, but also in the customer service, especially because they're going to be passionate about the mission. They're going to know what that mission is. They're going to be empowered to act on that mission. So here's an example of how you can start to build out your MVV, or what that's just short for your mission, vision, and values, okay? And if you don't think that this is linked to revenue generation and profits of your business, then you are sadly mistaken. You have to have this with laser focus. So I'll take like my office here at Syracuse University, the Office of Financial Literacy. Our mission is to increase personal financial knowledge and promote positive money management behavior, okay? So that's what we do, right? Going back to that circle. But if somebody were to ask me why we do it, well, quite honestly, and this is something I've thought about long and hard, it's this. It's to inspire others to take massive action. And what's so nice about that is that I'm doing here at the university something that's in line with my passion. And my passion, and it turns out my why in life, is to inspire others to take massive action. I'm sure you could have guessed I was going to say that. Take time. This might be the best investment in your early stages of your business to understand why you're doing what you're doing. Okay, because I'll tell you what, it will require massive action to be successful. And when that massive action hits and that hard work hits, you're gonna want to know with high definition clarity what your why is. Okay, so we talk about financial independence for entrepreneurs. So let's talk about operational definitions. Operational definition, obviously, it's not enough to say go and get financial independence. We have to first define what it is and how to do it. And financial independence might be a little bit different for everybody, but by and large, we have a general agreement on what that can be, which we'll get to in a second. Before we do, let's talk about just the state of things. 56% of Americans have less than $10,000 saved for retirement. So that's pretty dismal number, because obviously there's more than that are retiring. The typical working household nearing retirement does save in a 401k and an IRA, has a median $111,000 between the two accounts, which would yield less than $400 a month in retirement. And so I don't know about you, but my household runs on more than $400 a month, okay? And so if you're close to retirement, you might be able to tap into that Social Security, depending on when you want to start drawing on Social Security to help offset that, okay? Or if you have one of those rare pensions that still exist, that will help for this. But just looking at the income from your investments alone, which we'll get to in a little bit, how that works. Obviously, we want more than $400 a month, typically to live in inspired retirement. Okay, so crack nest eggs. So then you all are here presumably because you're interested in entrepreneurship, and so that begs the question, why, right? And you should be asking yourself that question every day, every moment that you're about to progress in your planning of your business. Why am I doing this? Well, here are some of the more obvious advantages of entrepreneurship. Obviously, unlimited earning, okay? Your revenue, your profit, your income is oftentimes, if you're running the show, directly related to your decisions and your sweat equity, okay? Your ability to make sound decisions on how much you're going to invest, how much things are going to cost, okay, how your books are going to balance that way, okay, is going to definitely affect your earning. the nice thing is you have an unlimited potential in most cases. Tax advantages, absolutely. There's tax advantages to entrepreneurship. And I popped up just a few here of some tax advantages, a dozen deductions for your small business. Okay, so there's a link here that you can go check out, 2017 tax guide, the deductible dozen, home office, office supplies, furniture, other equipment, software, mileage, travel, meals, all these things that you will work with your accountant at year's end to see if you can have those deducted. And you just want to make sure, I mean, obviously these will be itemized deductions if they exceed what would otherwise be your standard deduction for the year, and your accountant would help you figure that out. But these are something that absolutely, I mean, telephone charges, if your kids work for your business, okay, what you pay the kids as part of that business may be deductible, okay, up to a certain point. So you want to check on this stuff, make sure that you're taking advantage of these numerous tax advantages. So this is something that people are really attracted to when it comes to thinking about starting a business and entrepreneurship, okay? Passive income. Obviously, we want to maybe get this thing to a point where this business is giving us passive income. So the two types of income: active, where you have to go out, kill something, drag it back to the cave, okay? The 9-to-5ers, that's active income. All right, passive income is where we have something that's actually generating money for us without us being actively involved. And typically this will be something like a business that we are an absentee owner, real estate, or an investment portfolio will all be examples of what can generate passive income. And we'll talk about how much passive income we think we need to make that happen. So yeah, you can produce multiple revenue streams via side hustles. Like I mentioned earlier, I have some side hustles that I generate some passive, some revenue streams from, in addition to my primary income, and that's always fantastic. Selling for capital mass. A lot of folks will get into business thinking right from the get-go that I'm going to sell this thing for my retirement, and we'll talk about that in a minute. Potential liability protection. This is a big one. So I included a link here that you all have access to, because I believe Elvis is going to send this slide deck to everybody. You'll have this link, and I highly encourage you to go check this out. And what this is the business structures that you can incorporate your business under in order to take advantage of potential liability advantages. So what I mean by that is that depending on how you decide to structure your business, okay, you might be tied to the business's profits and losses in cases such as sole proprietorships or partnerships, and you can read more about that via these links. In which case, hey, your business, your profits and losses are going to be reported under your tax ID number, your social security number in a lot of cases, okay? Or if you go to something like an LLC, which I'm sure most people have heard of, then we have the ability to create a business structure that might be separate from yourself, in which case you would be a member, and if somebody went after you because of something that your business did, you might be covered here in terms of your liability coverage. So then the question becomes, well, what if I'm a sole proprietorship or a partnership and I don't have that sort of limited liability? So then the answer to that is you look at with your insurance broker, with your team, remember, seeking excellent counsel, your CPA, your accountant, your financial advisor, your team, you look at general liability coverage. And in a lot of cases with folks that have that think that they have a lot that somebody can go after, once you get to a critical mass, they will go out and they'll get something like an umbrella insurance policy to cover them for liability insurance. And so again, this is an introduction to these business structures, something you need to know about, but I would take the time to do your homework before you go and do the paperwork and pay the fees to file these things. Obviously, a sole proprietorship is one of the easiest ways you can start your business. The corporations, the S-Corps, if you're incorporating, going to be a lot more time, a lot more paperwork involved there, with certain pros and cons there. So do your homework, work with your team. This is a big decision when you're going to incorporate, okay? And so we have the potential liability protection as an advantage of entrepreneurship. So yeah, sure, we have these advantages. This all sounds really nice, but what are the disadvantages? Well, the disadvantages of entrepreneurship is that, hey, You don't get to just go home at the end of the day and leave everything behind, okay? Oftentimes, the responsibility to successfully run the daily operations, to balance the books, to deal with the marketing, to do the wholesale or the distribution, that will now be on you until you scale the business to the point where you can be spreading that work. So obviously the big disadvantage is that the waves will ebb and flow with your progress, with your work ethic. And so you do have to take that into consideration. It's not just you're going to do a job, a task, and you get to leave and then not worry about any of the back end administration like a lot of 9-to-5 jobs are. No, this is different ball of wax. So let's just talk about briefly the state of small business and the state of entrepreneurship here in America. There's between 25 million and 27 million small businesses in the US. And like I said at the beginning, that accounts for 60 to 80% of US jobs. So you as entrepreneurs are effectively fueling our economy. So congratulations, that's a big number. Small businesses produce 13 times more patents than larger firms, generate over 11 trillion in receipts per year. Huge chunk. According to 2016 statistics published by the SBA, 78% of small business startups survive the first year, and about half of all employer establishments survive at least 5 years. So look at that. So we hear this doom and gloom about half of businesses fail in the first year. Well, the numbers don't actually play out that way according to the SBA. So you can succeed with this, but let's talk about what the end game is and the point of this, this session: financial independence, the state of having sufficient personal wealth to live without having to work actively, like we discussed, for basic necessities, our needs, and lifestyle maintenance wants. So for financially independent people, okay, which is why we're doing this entrepreneurship thing, their assets generate income and cash flow that is at least as great as this monthly total. That is an operational definition. So I'm going to show you now this financial independence factor. What is it and how do we find it? So we talk about, all right, so we need this critical mass to be able to live based on the investments, okay? And so here's just an idea about how that might work. This FI factor, all right, let me see. This FI factor, you're going to go in there, and like I said, everyone's going to get these slides. Pop in the mortgage and the rent. Okay, well, how much is your mortgage or rent currently? And this is just an exercise so that you can wrap your mind around what would that number need to be for me to reach financial security and then also financial independence. Okay, what would that number need to be? And so if I pop up this calculator, and I'll show you a real-time example of how this works. Right here. So mortgage and rent, let's just say our mortgage rent is $1,200 a month, and this is a monthly. Utilities and phone is another $250. Let's say food for the month, we're going to peg it at $600. Transportation, let's say that we have a car payment and our gas. Between the two of those things, let's say it's going to be $350. Insurance and taxes for the month might be closer to $500 because we have higher taxes. If we're entrepreneurs, maybe we don't obviously have a health plan that is, maybe we have a health plan that's a high deductible and we have an HSA, a health savings account associated with that, so that might be $500. And these are just estimates, examples. These aren't based on any sort of statistics. These are just me showing you how to use this little tool that I've put in here. Discretionary, so this is the rest of your stuff: debt, fund, giving, and sharing. So in that discretionary box, let's just say that that rounds out to another $1,500. So your subtotal for the month is $4,400. Great. And now, so if you have a pension, you would put that payment here. If you have Social Security payments coming in, we can put that payment here. But let's just say that we don't. Let's just say that we're 30 to 35, and we're just trying to figure out how much would I need to have in a critical or capital mass to generate money to live year to year without having to worry about actively working. So this $4,400 a month, we multiply that by 12 because it's $52,800. Okay. And so all we said here, all this calculator says, this is just math. It says if we were to withdraw 3%, let's just say, of our critical mass out of our investments per year, Okay, and that 3% equaled that 52,800 that we need to live year to year as we just built out in our expenses. Well, that means that we would need $1.76 million in a critical mass, or in our investment portfolio, or our nest egg, or which can also include real estate, having renters paying you month to month, having profits from that sort of stuff. 1.76 million. So what that shows us is all you say, so to figure that out, you have this total down here times this new total, you multiply it by 12, that's going to be that. And then you would take that 52.8 or whatever is in that box, and you would just divide it by 0.03. And that would say, if I wanted to only take 3% out of my capital mass, my critical mass, my nest egg per year to live, if I did that, hopefully that would help stretch that nest egg out for a long, long, long time. And if I did that, then that's how I got to this number, 1.76. You take this number, divide it by 0.03. Now, if you wanted to say, I'm going to be more conservative, and I'm going to only take 2% out per year, maybe that'll stretch out my investments even longer. You would take this total, you would divide it by 0.02, okay? Just to show you what is this 2% of. That's how this thing works. So not anything crazy as far as rocket science, math, or anything, but what this does for us is it gives us an idea, okay, a goal of, wow, if I have this entrepreneurship venture, if I want to start this business, I have a goal that I need to hit so that I can choose whether or not I'm going to actively work from now on. And that goal is that FI factor that we just figured out. So that gives you an idea. And for some people, it's going to be way less than that. Okay, and so for some people, it's going to be more. Okay, so take that. That's your homework. Figure that out, and then bring it to a financial advisor, a CPA, an accountant. Bring it probably to a financial advisor or a pro to say, hey, so if this is what I would need if I were to withdraw 3%, then how do I get there? And have them look through it with you and say, well, this is because this is going to change based on your tolerance for risk and your specific goals, so they can maybe help you fine tune this even more. Okay. So that second transcendent question, what defines success? Okay, what defines success? So at every single step of the way, I want you to, before you invest anything, before you go and seek investors, before you go and try to get a prototype of a product that you're trying to develop, if you have a lawn care business, before you even go mow a lawn, I want you to ask yourself at every step of the way, what defines success? Okay, so obviously this is where goals kind of come in, and goals can be the most effective goals are going to be goals that are quantitative or SMART goals. They have to be specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and time bound. Or it could be qualitative. So if my job is to mow lawns and I'm just starting this lawn care business, maybe my qualitative goal is that I want these lawns to sparkle in the morning sun. I want the landscaping to be so pristine that what would define success for me is that every neighbor that sees it would then call me within 3 weeks. That's a qualitative definition of success. A quantitative is a little bit more straightforward. I want to make X amount of dollars per month or per year in the first 3 years. And then you can have some long-term kind of success goals there as well, for sure. Where am I going to, so what would define success for me in the first 5 years of my business, okay? Ask at every moment and project for longer time periods. I want you to be asking yourself, what defines success? Okay, and here's a nice model that I'm going to throw in here. I'm going to throw a lot of models and frameworks at you guys here today. And so again, if you have any questions as we're going, ask, and I will be sure to try to stop and answer and address those questions. But just hang on, because we got a lot of good stuff to go through. This is the hedgehog concept by Jim Collins, who wrote Good to Great, the book Good to Great. And he says, if you live in the center of this hedgehog model, then you're doing something that you're deeply passionate about, that drives your economic engine, and is something that you can be the best at in the world. And so take my example of being a former professional musician. Well, I loved playing music. I was deeply passionate about it. Okay. I found somebody that would pay me to do it in the United States Navy. But what would happen if I was just terrible at it? Would I get that job in the Navy in the first place? No, I wouldn't. So you actually have to have the skill, you have to have the passion, you have to find somebody that'll pay you to do it. And that's where a lot of these small business ventures will fall short. That second reason that small businesses fail is insufficient capital, okay? And so what happens if you have insufficient capital up front, especially if you're not selling anything or doing anything or making anything, and you're just seeking investor capital up front, well, when that runs out, if you're still not producing, then a lot of these small business owners will go and they'll turn to credit cards to fund their ventures, and that's when people can get into a lot of trouble. So let's talk about that, driving your economic engine. Does your product or service generate revenue? That's a question that I hope that you all can answer today. And if the answer is not yes, then you have another set of questions that follow. And again, if the answer is not yes, return to the first transcendent question. Why? Why am I doing this if I'm not generating revenue already? Maybe you have a very strategic plan for when you're going to start generating revenue, but I'll tell you what, this is going to be huge in your early success. So how does my product or service generate revenue? Better stated, how do I make money today? Okay. And so I'll show you this real quick, this page that there's a link to in here. This is called Effectuation of Entrepreneurs. It's a logical thinking, a framework that helps people build out ideas. I threw it in here because it's an amazing resource for you guys. I didn't make this, okay? This is from effectuation.org, but the first two concepts are particularly relevant to what we're talking about. Bird in hand, start with your means. Start with what you got, go out there and make some money, okay? And then you have, once you get some sales under your belt, at least you have some sort of proven model. You know that people will buy this. You have what they call this feasibility, okay? You've tested the market. There's some market feasibility. Before you do this though, check out what your affordable loss is, okay? So expert entrepreneurs limit risk. They understand what they can afford to lose at each step instead of seeking large all or nothing opportunities. So can you identify areas in your business today where you can capture upside even if the downside ends up happening? Or if the downside ends up happening and you lose something, is it going to be so damaging to your business that you can't continue? If so, probably need to relook at that initiative, right? So how do you make money today? And then if you are not already in business, generating revenue, question for you is, when do you take the leap? Okay? And so here's just a couple questions you can ask yourself. Do I have 12 months cash reserves? Do I have 12-month cost of living expenses in the bank in a savings account that if something happens or if I need to fund operations for the business, I have this business operation 12-month cash reserve in place? Am I actually just trading bosses? Okay, so what does this mean? In his book, Quitter, John Acuff talks about trading one boss from at your 9 to 5 for 20 or 30 mini bosses, which are your bills, right? You go home and you're going to have 20 mini bosses waiting for you every month. That's going to be your utility bill, your grocery bill, okay, your kids' braces. And those bosses are more demanding than the bosses that were at your 9 to 5 job. So if you feel like you're just trading bosses and that those expenses aren't going to be covered with your current revenue, with your current income from the job that you've been building on the side, maybe it's not time to take the leap. You want to pull that boat close to the dock, right? If you feel like you're drifting and you feel like you need to get to solid ground, which is that dock, which is your future, your passion, pull that boat close to the dock. You don't want to jump too quick. You don't want to jump too soon because you just end up getting wet. So here are 3 questions to be asking yourself for, hey, when do I take the leap? And then in terms of your financial security, your financial independence, I hope you guys all take this slide deck and internalize these questions as well. Am I in control of my day-to-day, month-to-month finances? Am I able to absorb an unexpected financial shock? Do I have the freedom to make choices that allow me to enjoy life? Am I on track to meet my financial goals? If you have to say no to any of these things and you're venturing into a higher risk situation with your entrepreneurial venture, then you might want to just take a step back, pump the brakes a little bit, and figure out how can you get to yes in these 4 financial security questions before and during the transition to your entrepreneurial venture. Okay. The third of the transcendent questions, what are the next steps? Okay, and that's not a rhetorical question. I want you to actually literally be asking yourself at every juncture, at every decision point, what are my next steps? Because you want to do the first things first and the second things not at all. You always got to be looking at what's the next first thing. So often when we go out with these awesome ideas that we think are going to be game changers, we go out there and we're looking 2 years down the road, 3 years down the road, or even a month down the road. We're looking at step 100. We're thinking first, how do I get investors so that I can get some funding for this venture? Or how do I get a bulldozer before I get a hammer? Okay, we need to be thinking on these first steps. So if I'm just starting out, maybe my next step is to call somebody who's smarter than me in whatever area I'm thinking and ask them what's my next step. But my next step is just to make the phone call. Okay, maybe if I'm in construction and I'm helping on a project and I get a gig where I'm going and doing maybe some home repair. Maybe my next step is to inventory my equipment. And that's just it. That's my next step. Maybe my next step after that, my next first step would be to buy a hammer, but I'm not going to go buy a hammer before I inventory my equipment. Make sure you're keeping that in mind. Now, when it comes to our finances, I'm going to point you to some tools here that are going to be part of the slide deck. Investor.gov is a hugely useful tool. If you're not familiar with investing, it's a really nice resource from the SEC. And it has nice calculators on there for figuring out, hey, if my goal is to get to that capital mass that we discovered earlier, and the capital mass, maybe again, you're going to take that to your financial advisor or your financial professional, and you're going to ask them, how much do I need to retire with dignity? What is my goal? Here's an idea, like this little exercise we did in this webinar, but what is my specific situation call for? And they can run you through their projections, which will be a little bit more detailed and accurate. But if you have that number, you can use calculators like this just to figure out how much do you need to be saving per month to get there, right? So we can use calculators on investor.org, and they look like this. And this is a straightforward mathematic calculator. This isn't something that's going to account for volatility in the stock market. But if my savings goal is $1 million, okay, and my initial investment is $1,000, my growth so the length of time that I'm going to be putting into this deal, let's say that it's 25 years, my interest rate, and so this is your estimated annual interest rate, and this is going to obviously be affected how much by market activity and what investments you choose. And so let's just go with a conservative interest rate for the purposes of this, and let's just say that we're going to be at 5% there, your estimated annual interest rate, and calculate there, and this will show you. If you contribute $17.40 every month over the next 25 years towards your goal, you'll have $1 million in savings. Okay, that's just a mathematical statement. Okay, please remember that different scenarios and your behavior and taxes and fees will change this picture. But this is just a free tool that you can use to wrap your mind around what it would take. So all this would show you is, hey, if you're only putting $100 a month in, obviously that's a lot less than what this is saying it would require you to hit that capital mass. So that's one of the free tools you can use I threw in there. Now, let's talk about accounts. Entrepreneur-specific accounts I have included in this presentation, and here's examples of 4 of them. So I'm not going to go through these super deep, but they're good for you to be aware of. And if you want any more information on any of these, you go to this irs.gov link, and it has all the information, and you search for the different types of plans: traditional and Roth IRA, simplify or SEP IRA, simple IRA, or solo 401k. You can search for those, and it'll give you more information than you can even imagine on those plans and how they work. But I put a kind of a brief overview on these. So these are accounts that entrepreneurs could use, or small business owners could use to invest and save for retirement, okay? If you weren't using one of these and you were just building up your capital mass of investments inside a regular investment account, that would be called a brokerage account. And you can get those at financial institutions. And you can invest in stocks, bonds, and mutual funds inside those brokerage accounts. But these are the accounts you use for retirement that are specific to individuals and business owners and small businesses, okay? And so number 1, traditional and Roth IRA. IRA just stands for individual retirement account. It's an account set up at a financial institution allows you to save for retirement with tax-free growth in the case of a Roth IRA, or tax-deferred growth in a traditional. So this is not an account that you'd be running through your business. This is something you set up with your Social Security number at a financial institution. You can set these up at brokerages with financial advisors, or you can set these up online at online brokerages, which are those, the E-Trades, Charles Schwab, Vanguard, the list goes on of places that would offer these to you. And inside of these accounts, you can invest in a slew of options of mutual funds, stocks and bonds. So that's one way that you can go. The traditional, you put money in, and then whatever you put in up to a specific limit will be tax deductible, okay, with the traditional IRA. If it's, and for this year, I think it's $5,500 for an individual, $6,500 if you're over 50 for 2017. The Roth you put in, you pay the taxes on that money, then you put it into the Roth IRA, and it grows and grows and grows. And then at the end, once you've reached 59 and a half, if you've held the investments in there for over 5 years, you get to have you get to withdraw the growth and your original tax-free. So that's kind of a popular option as well. And it depends on your situation and which one would be appropriate for you. And so the next here is a SEP, the SEP IRA. Traditional IRA is set up for employees by the employer. Only the employer can choose to contribute annually, and this is how much the limit is on that. So this is something you could use in a small business, okay? The small business, you could set this up with a SEP IRA, and any business can really set this up. But what small business owners like about the SEP IRA is that you get to choose what you're going to contribute each year, okay? If you decide you're going to share profits, or you're going to do, or you're going to contribute to employees' SEP IRAs, then you can contribute the lesser of 25% of their pay, or $54,000, whichever is less in the year. Simple IRA is a little bit different. In a simple IRA, you can set this up to offer to your employees, but you have to choose. You have to choose. You must contribute up to 3% match of what they put in, or a 2% contribution, whether or not they put money in. And the employee can contribute in a simple IRA, okay, into their simple IRA account. In a SEP IRA, they can't contribute. It's just the employer that's putting money in. And it's simple, they can, okay? Available to any small business, generally with 100 fewer employees. Then finally, the solo 401k is basically, it's a 401k plan to cover a business owner with no employees, and it can also cover the business owner and the spouse, but with no employees. And the same rules and requirements as any other 401k, owner acts as both employer and employee. So I do have this comparison chart that I included just so that you can see what the difference is in these plans. SEP IRA, simple, and a self-employed 401k here. And these are just who is it for, key advantages, who contributes, contribution limits. So there's a lot of details to these things, and I highly encourage that you work with your team, okay? That you work with your team to decide which one is best for you, especially if you have employees, because that's going to change the game on which one would be preferable in your situation. And these are just 4 examples. There's more examples that can be used, okay? So we're covering a lot here, but that's important. Find an account that fits, okay? And so just a brief overview for those of you that don't know. I don't know what the experience is of the participants on the session here. A bond, okay? I'm gonna go over just some really quick brief overview of these investment types. Bond is an investment in which the investor loans money. So you and I, if we buy a bond, we're loaning money to a corporation or government entity. They borrow the funds for a defined period of time. So they say, we're going to give this money back to you at a specific point in time, and in the meantime, we'll pay you interest each year, and they can pay that interest in different installments throughout the year, depending on the bond. So the bond is basically somebody saying, we need to raise money for operations. Let's issue bonds, and then you and I buy the bonds, in effect, lending them money. Okay, that's how the bonds work. Stocks, on the flip side, this isn't money that we're loaning to people. This is ownership interest in a company. So if a company decides that we're going to raise money by issuing ownership interest in our company, we're going to issue stock. Here we go. And if you buy a stock in a company, you in essence are, in a lot of cases, will get voting rights and a claim on percentage of profits. If they decide they're going to share their profits with you, then those profits are called dividends, okay? And so different from bonds. Bonds pay holders of the bonds or creditors interest. Stocks can pay dividends. They can pay if they choose, if the management chooses to share profits. And dividends are huge in an investment portfolio. A large percentage of the stock of the return from the S&P 500 historically has been from dividend reinvestment. So that's kind of a big deal. Okay, you want to get those dividends as part of your portfolio, depending on what your plan and your goals look like. That's just something very good to be aware of. Okay, so yeah, so fine, single bonds, single stocks. But do people really buy single bonds and single stocks if they're investing for retirement? They're trying to get to that capital mass. Well, really, if you only invested in a single stock, you're really at the mercy of what's going on in that company, aren't you? If they have a low quarter, if they have a bad year, if there's a management shakeup, if something really bad comes out in the news, I mean, you can look at recent examples of things that have been happening in the news, things that I'm sure CEOs of these companies would not want to have out there, but they happen and it affects their stock price. So you're tied to that if you own just that company's stock. So how do you mitigate that risk? Well, mutual funds is a good way to spread out your money, okay? And the way that mutual fund works is a mutual fund is really just a bucket of money that thousands sometimes of investors will put into. And they'll say, well, I don't want to just go buy single stocks because I feel that's too risky and I want to spread that risk out. So I'm going to give this money, I'm going to put this money into a bucket at a mutual fund company, and that mutual fund might assign a manager, might hire a manager for that bucket that will take all that money and go out and buy a portfolio of investments based on the objective of the fund, okay? So if the objective of the fund is to invest in growth stocks, they might go out and find 100 growth stocks, 100 companies that will be classified as growth stocks and put those in the portfolio. And then that way, if one of the companies inside the portfolio looks like they're gonna have a bad quarter or there's negative stuff going on, that manager can then either rebalance the portfolio. They can take some steps to kind of help to mitigate that risk, or just, hey, you have 99 other companies in there that'll make up for that, or at least help to diversify that risk. So that's how mutual funds work. It's important to know popular options include actively managed funds, which is what I just described. And because of that active management component, they can be a little more expensive, right? Because you're paying somebody to manage the mutual fund. Another popular option is index funds, and that's just, hey, somebody's going to take that bucket of money, they're going to invest in a portfolio that might mirror an index. Okay, so an index is an S&P 500, right? Dow Jones Industrial Average, these are examples of indexes. Okay, and so if your portfolio just mirrors the index, it means inside that index fund is going to be the same companies that are in the S&P 500, for example. And so they just let that, and then they'll just let it ride. So that basically it'll mirror the activity of the S&P 500 index. And because there's less interaction or management of that fund, they're just letting it mirror the index. Those tend to be less costly. Okay, target date funds are something you see in 401ks. They're one of the default options in a lot of 401ks nowadays. And these are just funds that will have typically a higher percentage of bonds in the younger or earlier years, because the bonds will represent some security in the portfolio versus the stocks, which might grow a little faster but be associated with more risk. And then as the fund matures to the date that is quote unquote going to be retirement, they might be shifting. It starts with more stocks, less bonds. As it gets closer to that maturity age, it might shift to more bonds, less stocks, in order to preserve some more of the principal inside the fund. That's how those target date funds work. Again, because they're actively managed and there is a lot of activity going on throughout the years, they might also be a little bit more expensive. And they also might be funds of funds, which is just a mutual fund that has a bunch of mutual funds in it, which again can compound the cost. So these are things to ask your administration at work, or to ask your financial advisor, or to be aware of, certainly if you're doing it on your own. What kinds of funds do I own? inside the mutual funds, what companies and bonds are in there. And then based on that, how much is my cost? Okay, so that's an overview of mutual funds. It's a way that people really enjoy. People really like using these for their long-term financial goals like retirement. So now that we've kind of done an overview of the vehicles or the investment types, here we're going to talk about the principles of investing. Okay, number one, commit to a plan. Okay, an investing strategy, and it can be as easy as every month I'm going to put in X amount of dollars in the same investments over a long period of time. So I've identified with my financial advisor that I'm going to have X number of mutual funds. I'm going to have, say, 5 mutual funds, and in those 5 funds, I'm going to put certain percentages of money, or certain set dollar amounts of money each month, month after month after month. And that is that would lead to a strategy called dollar cost averaging, as you see here. Dollar cost averaging. All that means is that we're buying the same investment for the same amount over a long period of time. So we're going to buy more shares when the price goes low. We're going to buy less shares when the price is high on that. But over time, because we're dollar cost averaging, the idea is that you get an average lower cost per share. And that's how that works. And again, any of these terms, we're covering a lot. Any of these terms that you are interested in, you go out and you ask your excellent counsel that we talked about, right? And principle 2, manage your risk. Okay, so we talked about stocks, bonds, and mutual funds. Do you think it's a good idea to own just stocks, just bonds, or just mutual funds? Well, it depends on your situation. Mutual funds are a great way to spread out that risk, managing risk. You diversify or spread out across different investment classes based on your risk tolerance. And from my time as a financial advisor, I can tell you, before when I was a financial advisor, I can tell you that I would talk to, you would think that somebody that's 18 or 20, 25 years old would have a very high tolerance for risk. Just because they're young and they have a lot of time to make up for potential losses in the market, you would think that. And you would think that somebody that's 60, 70, into their 70s might be a much lower tolerance for risk. But I ran into situations where I would have young 20-year-olds that just could not handle it if the market corrected itself. If the market went down, they would have a really hard time with that emotionally. And so maybe they would have to have a more conservative allocation in their portfolio. Whereas and then maybe you have somebody in their 70s that maybe they don't need the money. They're not drawing income from that money, and they're leaving it to kids, or they're giving it away upon their passing, and maybe they just have a very high risk tolerance, and they can afford, and they want to have a more aggressive allocation. So it's all really based on you. Okay, you guys, you gotta take a look at what is your risk tolerance with a pro. Principle 3, minimize your taxes and fees. Obviously, these things can drag on the overall return, long-term return of our investments. You gotta know how much you're paying in fees for the types of investments you have, for the accounts that you have those investments in, and then what are the tax consequences. So the big reason people use those IRAs, the traditional Roth, SEP, Simple, and the 401k is because the money that you put into it for retirement, you don't pay taxes on it now. Okay, you can take that as a tax deduction on your income at the end of the year. You don't pay taxes on it now. It grows and grows and grows until retirement. When you take it out, that's when you pay taxes on what you withdraw. Okay, and then for the Roth specifically, you do pay taxes now, but it grows and grows, and then whatever you take out at retirement is tax-free. So you got to know the tax implications of what you have. Okay, and again, you got to ask your pro. You got to ask someone on your team if they cannot intelligently vocalize to you what you're paying overall. Well, you just got to pump the brakes for a second and ask a couple questions there, right? Principle 4, stay the course. Regularly rebalance and mind the behavior gap. The behavior gap is just to say your investments inside your portfolio might have a certain return, but on average, investors will lag. They'll get less than the return of their investments in the portfolio over the long term because they end up going in there and messing with it, okay? Because we're very, humans, we're very reactive and emotional creatures. And so if the market goes down or something crazy happens, we might go in there and decide that we're going to sell when the market's down, okay? And when that happens, we end up saying locking in that loss in our investments, and now we've lost that opportunity to participate in any sort of rally or rebound back up, okay? Stay the course on your plan. Have faith in the plan and just stay, okay? And so we're going to talk now about that fourth principle. How and when will I exit? And this is going to be in your slide deck too. The investing plan phases, accumulation, decumulation. We kind of talked about that. You're going to spend the next several years, depending on your time horizon, accumulating your assets. If you're an entrepreneur and you sell your business tomorrow, you might get to that peak a lot quicker. And then you got to figure out, how am I going to take money from the capital mass to last forever, or how am I going to take make it grow every year to keep up with inflation? So there's two kind of phases here with our investing. So that's in your slide deck. I just put it in there so you're aware. It doesn't end when you reach the capital mass. You've got to figure out how you're going to strategically make that money last. So let's talk about that. How and when will I exit? Okay, the last transcendent question. Okay. Did you know the median asking price for businesses in 2015 was $225,000? Oh, wow. Okay, so that means that with that being the median, if I know that I need $600,000 to fund my monthly financial security goals, then that might not be enough. And so then you have to turn around and ask yourself, what do I do with that money to advance toward my goals? According to the site, businesses they're selling on average for about 2 to 3 times their annual cash flow and at 90% of the asking price. So again, that's just a statistic. That doesn't mean that will be your experience, but I do throw those out there just as a frame of reference for those of you who are thinking, I'm going to be using this business to fund my retirement. Think about that. Make sure you internalize that. Make sure you get a value on your current business, okay? And so talking a little bit more about this, are you a shark or a fish? So are you one of these pilot fish, and the shark is your business, and you're just hanging on for dear life because you can't retire, because you haven't accrued enough in your investment portfolio, or your business isn't worth enough to get it done? Maybe you're one of these pilot fish that's just hanging on for dear life. Well, we want to get you off of there, and we want to get you on your way, okay? 78% of small business owner clients plan to sell their businesses to fund their retirement. The proceeds that are needed, the proceeds of that sale are needed to fund sometimes almost 100% of their needs, but less than 30% of clients actually have a written succession plan. So they don't actually have a plan on how to do this thing. 78% are thinking they're going to do it. 30% are the ones that are actually planning on how they're going to do it. Okay? So here's a strategic thing you can do if this is you. How am I going to begin with the end in mind? How am I going to set up my business that I know that at some point I'm going to be free of this? I'm going to maybe want to not do this anymore, or just have the option of not doing it. Maybe I want to cut my work week down to 1 day, and I want to be involved in that capacity, and I just want to then have passive income from that business. Practice looking in from the outside. So if you were an investor looking at your business, what would be the return on investment for purchasing your business or for investing in you and taking equity? I included this link to this end that shows you the questions from the SBA of buying existing businesses. If you were thinking about buying a business, here are the questions that you might want to ask yourself about that business that you're looking at. As business owners yourself or entrepreneurs, you might want to be familiar with what people are going to be thinking down the road when you want to sell. And so here's a walk in their shoes. Take time looking through these questions and what they're going to be looking at. That way you can build your business with the end in mind, so that you can have a higher chance of success when you go to sell to fund your retirement. What assets do you have today? Okay, so you got to take a look at what assets does the business actually have. Okay, in terms of maybe property, plant, and equipment, and in terms of wages, salaries, current assets, things that are going to be cash or cash equivalent in the first year. Okay, what assets do you have today that you would include in evaluation? Okay, and so you got to look at that. Take a look at that. What is your built-in succession plan? Okay, so go talk to somebody that's done this before. Okay, or work with an attorney. Okay, if you're in a partnership, what's your exit strategy if things go awry? Make sure you have that in writing before you go into the partnership. What's your succession plan? Maybe a lot of folks are focused on letting their family take the reins down the road. So what is your plan to train the kids on how to run the business? What does that pipeline look like? What does the compensation look like over time? And when will you be taking a step back? If you want to be an absentee owner, meaning that you still own the business, but you're not involved in the day-to-day operation of the business, I think of like Bruce Wayne in Batman, with this one, with Wayne Corp. I think about how Bruce Wayne, being Batman, he obviously still owns Wayne Enterprises, but he spends most of his time flying around in a cape and lets Mr. Fox run the show. He's an absentee owner. How would you be able to afford to take on trusted management? So all those great questions for that exit strategy. So, wow, we talked about a lot of stuff, okay? And that was a jam-packed hour. But here they are. And really, if this is all you take away from this webinar, I hope that you can at least say, hey, these are questions I'm going to ask myself at every step of the way in my entrepreneurial journey. And the more that you align yourself with these questions, the more that you start with why you're doing the things that you're doing, the more success I know that you guys are going to have in the long term. So that's gonna be the end of the content from my end. And so. I see there's a question over in the chat bar. Are there any facets to being assigned overseas and investing in one of the IRA accounts? Okay, so being assigned overseas, I assume that just means active duty, military, and so if you have a Social Security number, if you can get that IRA account set up before you go overseas, that might be easier logistically for you. And if it's an IRA, if it's an individual retirement account that's under your Social Security number, and that IRA can typically be linked to your checking account. Sometimes you can get it just a direct deposit from payroll into that IRA, but more often than not, you get your paychecks in your checking account. You still get paid being assigned overseas, and that can be an automatic deposit into your IRA, and you can set it up with an advisor before you even go, that you're going to be investing, when that money hits every single paycheck or every single month, you're going to be investing in XYZ investments at a certain percentage. You can set that up before you go so that that's all automated. So absolutely you can do that. Absolutely you can do that. All right, so that was the question there. Elvis, how are we doing on time, and do we have time to open up for questions, or should we do like some sort of recap?
I'll say let's give it 2 minutes and see if anybody has any questions.
All right, pop it in if you guys have any questions. We covered a lot of information, so if you're feeling overwhelmed, I totally get it, but I am going to send these slides to everybody so that you're going to have access to all those links. And please feel free to follow up on that information and learn more. Knowledge is power.
So Derek, you're gonna share your contact info, right?
You can send. I can send definitely. Do you want me to send that along with the slides, my contact info?
That'll be nice.
Yep, I'll send that. And then if anybody has any questions, they can email me. If they don't want to ask a question in the chat box. And I think this is available after the fact on YouTube, right, Elvis? Or is it a separate link that it'll be available?
This is available on YouTube. This session is being recorded, and you can always go back and later watch it. I will definitely send a link with the slides as well as your contact info after today, probably by the end of the day.
Awesome.
We have a question from Phil. He says, any books you recommend?
Oh, any books I recommend? Oh, that is a good question. All right. Yes, we actually talked about some of the books during the talk. And so some of the books I recommend, obviously, that Start With Why was the one that that we first talked about. I did mention the book Quitter by John Acuff. And that will be, that's one that really does talk about that dream, the difference between dream job and day job. When do you know when it's time to take that leap? That's a really good one. As far as financial books, I do like Thomas Stanley's The Millionaire Next Door. That's a good book. It kind of gives you a peek into a large population of millionaires that Thomas Stanley interviewed in writing the book, and how you get to get behind the scenes to kind of look at how they think and what they do that drives their success. And it's not really what you would think it is. And so those are maybe some, you know, 3 books there that I would recommend in context for this session. Oh, and also Good to Great by Jim Collins. We touched on that, and that's a great one, especially if you're a small business owner. Oh, and I also got to throw in this one, The 5 Dysfunctions of the Team by Pat Lencioni, and Extreme Ownership by Jocko Willink. So maybe we can get those out in a list, but that would be there you go. There's enough reading for you for the next 6 months. All right, we got some questions, anybody?
So that's just saying thank you very much for your insights, and I guess if there's any other questions, I guess this is it. And thank you all for joining us today. Like I said, this session is being recorded. I will send out an email later today about the slides, the link to the session, and Derek's contact info.
Thank you, everybody. I really enjoyed it. Have a great day.
Thank you.